I'd like to call the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of June 20th, 2023 to order. The first item we need to take care of tonight is actually to appoint a temporary secretary for this specific meeting. And for that, assuming that you're willing to do it, I'd like to appoint Commissioner Hayford O'Leary.
Okay, I accept.
Okay, that's very good. So Commissioner Hayford O'Leary will be fulfilling the role of temporary secretary tonight. That brings us to the open forum. The open forum is an opportunity, of course, for people to speak and address the HRA. Each speaker is to keep their comment period to 3 minutes to allow sufficient time for others. Comments are to be an opportunity to address the HRA. Please refer to the HRA agenda and minutes webpage for additional ways to submit comments. You may also call in tonight at telephone number 612-861-9764. I'll repeat that because I know sometimes numbers can go fast. 612-861-9764, or email ldubois@richfieldmn.gov with questions. You may call into the open forum by dialing 1-415-655-0001. That's 1-415-655-0001. Use webinar access code 2630-557-9041 and password 1234. Do we have any callers?
Chair, member of the board, we don't have any callers on the line currently.
Okay. Well, if someone is in the greater audience out there and they're trying to call in, just alert us and we will allow for them to speak. Is there anyone here tonight present who would like to address the HRA in the open forum? Seeing no one, then we will move forward. I'd like to we like to ask for approval of the following minutes: the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting minutes of April 17th, 2023, the special Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting minutes of June 5th, 2023, and the special Housing and Redevelopment Authority work session minutes of June 7th, 2023.
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. All right, that brings us on to the consent calendar, and I will turn it over to staff.
Mr. Chair, the agenda.
Oh, excuse me. I'm forgetting the approval of the agenda. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, well, that brings us to the consent calendar, and for that I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson, members of the board. The consent calendar contains several separate items which are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved. No further HRA action on these items is necessary. Item A tonight, consideration of a resolution authorizing execution of a developer agreement with the West Hennepin Affordable Land Housing Trust, doing business as Homes Within Reach, for the acquisition, rehabilitation, and sale of houses under the New Home Program. Item B, consideration of the adoption of a resolution approving a subordination of the contract for private redevelopment and a collateral assignment of the tax increment financing note for Woodlake Center, and authorize the executive director to execute an estoppel certificate. That concludes the consent calendar.
All right. Any discussion?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar items.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that brings us on to staff report number 13.
Thank you. I will ask Assistant Community Development Director Julie Urban to present the staff report.
Chair, members of the HRA, In April of 2022, the Housing and Redevelopment Authority approved a preliminary redevelopment agreement with Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative to develop approximately 40 units of affordable, supportive rental housing with the target population of neurodiverse youth on the HRA-owned property located at 6613 to 25 Portland Avenue. The preliminary agreement identified several tasks for Beacon to undertake, and since that time, Beacon has done several of those items. First, they have reduced the number of items to 38 and the bedroom mix to all studios. They have identified a service provider, obtained an initial capital grant from Hennepin County, submitted preliminary plans for sketch plan review by city staff, held a neighborhood meeting, obtained a commitment from Hennepin County for 20 units of supportive housing, and conducted some environmental testing. Beacon is now seeking financial assistance for the project from the HRA through the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as well, along with a commitment from the HRA to sell the property at the reduced price of $1. Beacon is seeking a variety of other funding sources for the project, including low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC, through the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. The application for LIHTC is due July 14th, and funding decisions are expected by the end of the year. Beacon must present evidence of financial commitments and site control along with the application. They are necessary for the project in order to be competitive for LIHTC funding. The attached redevelopment agreement offers that commitment, proposing the following terms and deadlines: a $500,000 grant from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, sale of the property for $1, and I will note that the property appraised for $570,000, making this a commitment worth $569,999. Funds are to be provided at the closing on the property and on the construction financing. There is a requirement to close on the property by January 31st of 2025. Because of the competitive nature of LIHTC funding, Beacon is asking that the HRA agree to support their application for up to 2 rounds of funding. Construction would be expected to begin by July 1st of 2025. Commitment by Beacon to provide at least 50% of the units affordable at 30% of the area median income, and compliance with the city's inclusionary housing policy, including the accessibility requirements. The terms of the redevelopment agreement are contingent upon the project receiving tax credits, as well as city land use approvals. Sale of the land will actually require another public hearing in front of you at a future date. At this time, we estimate that that would be around the same time as land use approvals, which could be in August or September later this year. I would point out a couple other things in the policy section, just that, as you know, the Metropolitan Council allocates a share of affordable housing to communities throughout the metro area, and Richfield's identified share for the 30% AMI units is 66 units by 2030. And as you also know, it's a challenge to get those units, so this project offers the opportunity to help us work towards that goal. And then also, if you recall, last fall we approved priorities for our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and this project meets several of those priorities, including those housing units affordable at 30%, housing with accessible units, housing with supportive services, and housing with resident rental subsidies. And that concludes my staff report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. The developer is also present here this evening if you have any questions for them. Thank you.
Commissioner Supple.
I had a question for the developer. I was at the neighborhood meeting, and there were a lot of different suggestions about changes that could possibly be made. And the architect there had said they were going to look at some changes. So I was just wondering if we could have an update on where we are in that process.
It's supposed to always be on.
We tested it before the meeting and it was working, but.
Actually, we'll need you to speak into a mic. Would you, I'm going to pull a mic here over toward you.
You know, we tried some of the controls over here.
Would you, oh, now it's working. Thank you.
Okay. New system.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here today. Yes, at the neighborhood meeting, there were kind of a number of questions and thoughts that came through on what we could do to kind of help this project better blend in with the neighborhood. And I think some of those things were keeping as many of the trees that were already existing there, which we're working really hard to do, especially putting in protective measures for trees that aren't on this property to ensure that they don't get damaged during the project. Creating a fence around the project that will provide some security for both the current residents and the new residents that will be living there. One of the questions that we were asked was to look at, could we bring this down to a two-story building? And after kind of going through all of the requirements that are required on this site and looking at was it feasible to drop it down to a two-story building overall, we weren't able to do that. However, we were able to work on some of the architectural features that kind of step it down within, so it's not as it doesn't come off as imposing to current residents that are in that neighborhood. Paul, am I missing anything?
No, I'm Paul Melblom with MSR Design, the architects. One of my colleagues was at that meeting, I wasn't, but I know one of the residents' concerns was about the fence, and we'll have a solid 6-foot fence around the back. We're going to have trees in the back to help, as they grow, to help provide both kind of visual break between the building and the neighbors behind, both directions, so that the neighbors behind tend to see less of the people in the building, and the people in the building tend to see less of the neighbors behind. There were a couple of suggestions about how people would be using the space. We have moved the kind of a smoking hut that we had in the backyard to the side yard, so that's between the property and the gas station to the north, and we're going to have a chimney. It's an outdoor space, but it's going to have a chimney so that the smoke, with an exhaust fan, so that the smoke will go up and go out and exhaust 3 stories up, so it tends to go into the atmosphere as opposed to way in the neighborhood.
Thank you. And then as a follow-up question, I don't know if this is for staff or for the developers. You mentioned there's going to be a public hearing before the land sale. Is there also a public hearing associated with the land use approvals, or when is the community going to get a chance to weigh in?
Yes, there is a public hearing at the Planning Commission. We haven't received a formal application yet from Beacon, so I can't give exact dates for when that would be. Once we receive an application, it's about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks before Planning Commission is scheduled. And so it'll be on rezoning and a comp plan amendment is what that will entail.
Okay, and then there also will be another public hearing here.
Right. Yep.
And so, because I had asked about when the public hearings are going to be, because you indicated there were several steps because of all the different types of funding we're putting together, and so this is allowing Beacon to apply for the tax credits. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, they need a local funding commitment to make them competitive for the tax credits in order to be able to move forward.
But the neighborhood will get to weigh in again before any final decisions are made. Is that?
Yes, exactly
okay.
right.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Hayford O'Leary.
Thank you. My question is just the amount of the subsidy, and having recently joined the HRA and just recalling this from the joint work sessions, I recall the amount of the land being written down to be basically given to the developer. The $500,000 grant from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, how did you arrive at that amount?
So we have gone back and forth with Beacon a little bit on that. They originally came in for a larger amount, and our financial consultants took a look at the numbers and didn't feel comfortable with that amount. And so Beacon came back with this amount. It gets them to a 10% threshold of 10% of committed funds, and that is worth a certain amount of critical points in the LIHTC process. We typically have provided tax increment financing for developments. In this case, with a smaller project and a small footprint and without a substandard building on the property, we just decided it's not worth going down that route. And also, it was a wise choice because the legislature recently made tax changes to what's called 4D classifications. Affordable housing pay a lot less in taxes, so there wouldn't be much increment available. So the trust fund is our method for funding them, this particular project.
Okay, and then just, I think it's implied in what you said, but just to clarify that these two items, the discount land sale and the $500,000 grant would be the extent of the HRA subsidy. There wouldn't be additional layers to be added in the future?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I would have a question for the developers. It was noted here in the document here that the number of units, of course, has been reduced by a couple, and the bedroom mix has been changed from some one bedrooms to all studios. And I was just wondering about the thought process behind that.
Commissioners, after looking at how we had developed the building and looking at how the site lays out, it really worked a lot better if we went down to all studios. It also allowed us to maximize some of our service area and community space within there. There's a number of additional setbacks because of overlay districts that this project is in, and it really was kind of tightening this project. And then secondly, when we started this process, internally discussions over a year ago, we thought that it would be nice to have this mix of studios and one-bedroom units. Having further kind of had conversations with our service provider, our operations team, we've come to understand that the population that we're looking to serve is probably better served with studio units.
Great, thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Commissioner Hayford-O'Leary?
Probably more for staff, but I guess whoever jumps on it. My question is how long are they committed to provide at 30% AMI, or what happens in the future if Beacon were to sell the property?
So with the tax credit funds, they will be committing to 40 years of affordability.
Okay.
I had a backup question to that as well. So when someone is qualifying for the affordability, they have to meet certain income requirements, and then say if they're getting a better job and things are picking up for them economically, what happens as their income rises above that level?
So a tax credit recipient is required to certify income annually, and so after the initial qualification, then the next year is the recertification, and upon recertification, someone could earn up to 140% of that original limit, so that there is some flexibility. You don't immediately leave if you go over that amount, but once you get over that 140%, then you would have to, they would ask them to leave, or they would have to find another place.
So as it currently stands, half of the units will be 30% and the other half will be 50%. So someone could shift categories as well at this point, unless we end up with more affordability?
That's potential, right?
Okay. I do think, one of the challenges we've had is finding ways to provide workforce housing for people that are earning 30% of the area median income. So I think this is a good use of the affordable housing trust funds, because it is targeting the area of affordability that we've been working on.
All right, any additional questions or comments? I guess hearing none, I guess I would entertain a motion.
I mean, this is not a public hearing, so.
Yeah,
It's
not,
your choice. Yeah.
it's not officially a public hearing, but it seems like the commission would be fine to hear from you.
At the podium.
Yep. And when you reach the podium, if you would say your name and address and write it down on the sheet of paper you'll find up there.
Sarah Ochoa, 6612 Oakland Avenue, Richfield. Just right behind where this property would be developed. And this is?
Leo Murphy, 6633 Portland Avenue.
Thank you for
Thank you.
bringing up the questions from the meeting we had last time. I appreciate your follow-up with that. So I just wanted to clarify. So will there be trees, no fence, or a fence and trees? I was unclear when you spoke of that. Both. Okay. Appreciate the shift of the smoking area. I think one other topic we discussed was parking.
Can you refresh my memory of what because I wasn't there, sorry.
Sure. I believe it was up to 5 spaces. Is that correct? I'm trying to remember. And I think it was where if it was reduced in number of units, where that could be, so it wasn't interfering the house directly next door, where they would be hearing noise, and people coming and going, because we don't have that now in that area. And then we also discussed the traffic is pretty busy there now already, and we understand it's just most people will be using public transportation. That's why that site was chosen. Was there another site, any other site in Richfield that was considered that is also a plot of land that also has access to public transportation? For example, in front near the memorial by the park, there's a huge plot of land that is never used, that is right by all the bus areas. Has anything else been considered?
I guess I would refer that question on to staff.
Yeah, and maybe that's a Beacon to answer, but we initially met with Beacon a year plus ago, and which we often do with interested developers, and we kind of walk through available sites. We talk about 6501 Penn. We talk about this particular site. We tell them, maybe to reach out to the hub developers. Those are we have some standard ones. We say, there's a couple of churches that might have some land. And so we give that list of sort of what we see as options. It's my understanding they looked at this site, and again, being right next to the transit station and the size, because they do feel that this 38 to 40 units is sort of a sweet spot for them. A lot of the other properties were too large, but I don't know what all went into their decision-making. But they came back to us and said, this is the site that we are excited about.
It would seem from what you were discussing with the targets that need to be met to get these financial grants and things like that, that a slightly larger size might be a benefit, because we've already said that a smaller size is not of benefit. So it would seem logical that perhaps a slightly larger size might be a benefit and would better fit in another location. Do we have access as to why those other locations were not acceptable? I mean, public transportation alone cannot be the only reason. That's one thing.
Would the developers like to address the questions?
Mr. Chair, just since it's more conversational and it's not exactly about this approval, I wonder if you might suggest they do that separately from this approval?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good recommendation. We certainly appreciate your addressing the commission tonight and everyone present here tonight. And so I know everyone has taken note of your comments and your concerns. But I guess to be looking at the issue before us, I guess we'd like to segue back into the regular agenda.
Okay.
And just to reiterate something that Commissioner Supple said, that there are land use approvals yet to come, including a comprehensive plan amendment, which really asks, is this an appropriate density change for that site, which I think is one of the questions that you're asking. So there will be a public hearing for that in the future.
Okay. And I apologize. Are you our local commissioner that we would contact with questions or concerns?
Ben Whalen would be your local council member, but
Okay.
yeah,
He's not here tonight, though.
he is not here. He does not serve on this board.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, no, thank you. Thank you for bringing your concerns tonight.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask just one follow-up question that was sort of related to what was raised by the residents for staff. I don't recall other uses for this site being proposed. Have there ever been townhome type things or other things like the comprehensive plan currently envisions for that site that have been proposed and financially viable?
Yes, we've, there was a townhome proposal back in maybe 2012 that were 5 or 6 units, and it just wasn't penciling out, so that kind of faded. We've had a couple of other multifamily developers take a look at the site. One did make it to a work session. They were talking about trying to figure out how you could build affordable housing without all those layers of subsidy. Is there a way to do it through the construction costs? And that was not something, a nut they were able to crack. It's a tough one. We had another two townhome developers look at it around the pandemic time and when the housing market took off in terms of high costs of construction. The numbers again just wouldn't work. You'd have to sell $500,000 townhomes to make it work, and that nobody thought that was a realistic site for selling that kind of a product. So yes, we've looked at and considered lots of different ideas over the years.
But I do remember from earlier conversations that there has been talk about that the property has been fairly hard to market for some various obstacles. So I know kind of in the initial conversation about this project, a lot of people thought it looked attractive because it seemed like compatible use for the site.
Yes, there are several challenges. One of they can really only have one curb cut, and it needs to be located as far south as possible. So to look at putting several duplexes or other things would be a challenge. It is, it gets narrower or less deep the closer you get to the roundabout, and so it's a challenge to fit a building there and meet setbacks with that shallow depth. Those are just a couple of the challenges, but yeah, so it has proven to be a more challenging property for us. That's why we get involved, because the private market is just not going to do it without our help.
So I would move to approve the attached resolution approving a redevelopment agreement with Astor Commons Limited Partnership and Astor Commons GP LLC for the development of up to 38 units of affordable supportive housing at 6613 to 6625 Portland Avenue.
Second.
All righty, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And I think, I guess, probably the parting words on this is, as mentioned, this is not the final point of this issue. There will be additional opportunities to address the issue and along with public hearings. So I would certainly encourage you to stay engaged. All right. With that, we will now move to staff report number 14.
There's Karen. Thank you, members of the board. The property at 101 66th Street East was first vacated in 2013. After 3 years of neglect, it was purchased for redevelopment by PLH and Associates in 2016. After many years of work, the city approved plans for a 42-unit mixed-use building in October of 2020, and the HRA approved a contract for private development to provide financial assistance in the form of tax increment in January of 2021. Shortly thereafter, PLH sold the property to 101 East 66th Street, LLC, who is the current developer. In June of 2021, the developer presented new plans for redevelopment of the site, and on January 11th of 2022, the council approved those plans. That included a development of an 80-unit, 5-story mixed-use building. On June 21st of 2022, the HRA approved a contract for private development and the issuance of a TIF note for up to $2.3 million. In the interim, the developer's budget has been impacted by increases in both construction costs and interest rates. Ellers, the HRA's financial consultant, has reviewed updated project finances and has concluded that, as was the case with the previous financial request, there is a substantial financial gap that must be filled in order to redevelop this blighted site, and that an increased subsidy of $385,000 is justified. This would result in a recommendation for a new TIF note of up to $2,685,000. HRA staff has worked with our legal counsel and the developer to negotiate an amended and restated contract. Among the provisions of the contract are that the developer will make improvements totaling at least $18 million to include construction of a new 5-story mixed-use building with approximately 80 units and 2,800 square feet of ground floor commercial space. The developer will pay and reimburse the HRA for all upfront costs. A minimum of 20% of the units in the building, that's 16 units, will be reserved for households earning up to 60% of AMI for 15 years. Affordable units are to be distributed proportionally among the various unit types. In accordance with the City and HRA's inclusionary housing policy, the development must include at least 3 Type A units that include roll-in showers and grab bars, or at least 2 units that are fully ADA accessible. The HRA will withhold the first 10% of the tax increment for reimbursement of ongoing administrative costs throughout the life of the district. The contract includes a one-time look-back where the project's financial performance will be reviewed and the principal amount of the TIF note may be adjusted accordingly. And this is a look-back that will happen 2 years after project construction begins or when the project is complete. And what would happen there, the note would never be increased, but if project costs were drastically lowered, interest rates came down significantly within that time, and the returns that the developer was going to get were significantly higher than what we looked at as part of this pro forma, we would be able to reduce the amount of that note. As a reminder, in a TIF district, the property owner continues to pay taxes on the pre-redevelopment property values to all taxing jurisdictions or to the city, county, and school district, as had been the case prior to the establishment of the TIF district. The property owner also pays property taxes on the value of the new construction. These new taxes can be returned to the developer as reimbursement for costs necessary to make the project financially feasible. There is a representative, Garrett Duncan is here with 101 66th Street if you have questions for them. Otherwise, staff will stand for questions.
All right, I'll open the floor for questions from my fellow commissioners. Commissioner Hayford O'Leary.
I think my main question would be for the developer, if you could come to the podium. If you could provide sort of a status of where you're at with the project overall. If this is approved tonight, where does that leave you and your timing?
Yeah, this is Garrett Duncan, like Melissa said, with the developer. We originally were approved quite some time ago, and we applied for a permit back in July. That permit process is still continuing. It's really nearing completion, July of last year. Nearing completion now, so really our next step is this here today, approval of the permit, and then starting the financing. We have a term sheet ready right now, so I mean, we'd really like to start construction sometime in the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay. Staff, could you say anything about the permit process? A year of permit process seems like a long time.
It is a long time. There have been some delays, and I would say that there have been some delays on both sides. I think both sides have experienced some capacity issues and some staffing issues. There have just been some delays in that process. But it is my understanding that we are essentially ready to issue that permit, and now the wait is here.
Okay. Yeah, I support the request given what's happened, but I will say, I hear regularly from the neighborhood they're very dissatisfied with the condition of the site, and it is frustrating that these delays are now costing the public more money to subsidize this at an increased cost. So I just really urge you to move as quickly as you possibly can on this.
Yep, absolutely.
The other question was for staff. I know that they had to tear down a structure because of vandalism. Did the construction work of tearing down that house affect anything with the timing of the TIF action or anything with the deadlines?
It did not. The contract that was in place required substantial construction to have begun by the end of last year. So this amendment, and then the land use approvals were extended earlier this year. This contract will extend these deadlines a little bit. Unfortunately, the tear down of that one building was not enough to renew that deadline or keep it live.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Supple.
I had a related question. I'm trying to understand, I know where some of the former buildings were, and then just to the east of that is an area that looks like it's to hold water. Is that part of this development site, or is that something that's separate, and who would be responsible for like mowing and that kind of stuff there?
That is completely separate. That is owned by the city. It is a stormwater pond.
Okay,
So if there are maintenance concerns, those should be brought to the attention of Public Works, or any staff member could help you with that.
Okay, because that was one question that had come up, so it's totally separate. Because I noticed that the developer seemed to have mowed the lawns in the rest of the area, so I wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
And then I know there were concerns from the neighborhood, and this is not what we're necessarily discussing tonight, but I just want to make sure that you're being a good neighbor and thinking about, things like how you're going to provide parking and that kind of stuff to encourage residents to take advantage of the parking in your site so that it doesn't clog up the streets in the winter and that kind of thing. So we just want to encourage you to be a good neighbor. And then the other question I had, the TIF district, I believe, was certified in March of 2023. So what happens with the TIF if we get started? I assume that this will all go forward, but if there's any more delays, is there a time limit on that?
Yes, members of the board. The developer has 5 years to incur TIF qualified expenses. After that point in time, we can only reimburse any purchases and expenses within that first 5 years. So we are losing time here as we wait for the development to get going. There is a small amount of increment that is being generated now that could potentially go to the project, and we would like it to go to the project, so we'd like it to get started.
So in other words, we need to get in before that deadline, otherwise we can't qualify for the TIF, correct?
That's correct. You'd have to look at the expenses that were incurred already. So, for instance, acquisition has already happened. They could be reimbursed for that. But other expenses like construction of the underground parking, if that doesn't happen before that 5-year deadline, that is no longer a qualified cost.
So then I guess I would agree with Commissioner Hayfoot-O'Leary that it's really important to get going and not waste any more time.
Okay, any additional questions or comments? I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve a resolution approving the amended and restated contract for private development with 101 East 66th Street LLC and authorizing the issuance of a tax increment limited revenue note.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
That moves us on to staff report number 15.
Thank you, members of the board. The Interchange West Lindale Gateway Tax Increment Finance District was established in 1999. This district is a scattered site redevelopment district with multiple projects and outstanding obligations, including the Best Buy corporate headquarters, Main Street Village, and the Castile Place townhomes. Best Buy has approached the city and HRA to request a modification to their individual contract, which would remove the minimum assessment agreement that prevents the tax value of their property from falling below $118.5 million during the life of the TIF district, which, as a reminder, ends on December 31st of 2025. After an initial denial of the request by the City Council on May 23rd, staff and Best Buy representatives continued discussions in hope of finding a path forward that would address the needs and concerns of all parties. These concerns left unaddressed could lead to significant costs, staff time, and uncertainty in the coming years. The attached contracts and assessment agreements address the largest concerns for both the city, HRA, and Best Buy. Specifically, it guarantees that the HRA will be able to recoup $851,000 without the threat of future litigation, and it allows Best Buy to discuss a fair market value for its property with the county and pay the commensurate taxes. The agreements require a compromise on both sides. Best Buy believes that the HRA has underpaid them and that they are owed approximately $600,000, which they will not recoup, and they have agreed not to contest the HRA recouping that $851,000. The HRA will almost certainly see a reduction in tax increment generated in the remaining years of the TIF district, an estimated loss of $105,000 to $385,000 in pooling revenue. The parties agree that the costs associated with continued disagreement outweigh the losses posed by the compromise. Staff and its legal and financial experts recommend approval of the attached resolution and the agreements. In order to modify and/or terminate the MAA, Best Buy needs the approval of both the City Council and the HRA, in addition to approvals by Hennepin County and the Richfield School District. On June 13th, the Council approved the attached documents. Representatives from Best Buy are here again tonight. I know that two of you were present and voted at the council meeting a couple of weeks ago, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Supple.
Can you give us an update? You said the school district and the county need to give their approvals, where we are in that process and what happens if they don't meet the deadlines?
Yes, I can give you an update on the city side, and then maybe I'd ask Best Buy to give you an update on their side. Immediately following the council meeting, the city staff reached out to Hennepin County and the school board once again to let them know of the action that had been taken, that the HRA would consider this tonight, and to please contact us if they had any questions about the action or impacts that it might have on their jurisdictions. And we had reached out to them in the past as well, so they were familiar with the item. If Best Buy is unable to get approvals by June 30th, the modification for Pay 2024 would not be able to take effect. The removal of the termination for Pay 2025 would still be possible. They would just need approvals by next year. So I understand Best Buy is working toward that, but they would be the best representatives to give an update on that.
Good evening, Commissioners. Good evening. So my name is Tracy Smith. I'm an employee at Best Buy. And to respond, following up on what Ms. Pellman said, we have also reached out to both the school district and the county last week after the city's approval. We spoke with the county, and our understanding is it's under review. We've also spoken with the assessor's office. Various steps are underway, including tours of campus and things like that. And so that is in review, and we do hope to get approval by June 27th. We'll see if that's possible. With respect to the school district in our emails with the superintendent, he has confirmed that there is no financial impact and understands that with respect to the Richfield Public Schools. That was in his emails. We have offered help to try to walk through, whether it's education, whether it's some of the background that we've done, and if there's any necessary steps that we can do to help, facilitate a June 26th approval, and we are encouraging approval by June 26th. So we understand that, of course, he has his process and procedures and things that he absolutely needs to do as well. So we certainly respect that.
Thank you. So to clarify, no matter what happens, we could still go forward with the process for 2025, but the 2024 one is going to depend on whether or not we meet the deadline. Is that accurate?
That is correct. The June 30, 2023 deadline is for 2024. If the approval is granted after that, it will be in effect for 2025.
All right, thank you. That's good clarification.
Commissioner O'Leary? Okay. Any additional questions or comments from the commissioners?
Well, I think I'm going to reiterate what I said at the council meeting in case there's somebody that's tuning in now. I want to thank the staff for all the time that they spent on behalf of the city in good faith negotiations with Best Buy. And my top priority has always been what is best for the city as a whole. And we made it clear earlier in the negotiations process that there should be no financial loss to the HRA through any agreement that was reached. And this proposal does a much better job of meeting that criterion. So I want to thank both parties for their good faith negotiations. It allows the HRA to recoup the $851,000 without threat of future litigation while removing Best Buy's claim to an additional $600,000. And these gains mitigate any loss we might see in the pooling revenue, so there's no harm done to the city. And Best Buy is also given the opportunity to work with Hennepin County for a reassessment. So while we work to make sure that the local taxpayers were protected, it was also fair to Best Buy. So thank you for everybody that worked together on this process.
Well, I guess I would also like to commend the staff for all the work they put in on this. I think it's a fair compromise that works in the best interests of all the parties. And I think kind of stays within the spirit of the original minimum assessment agreement. I wasn't a party to the people who put that together back in the late 1990s, but I'm sure that they were all sitting around a room and they wanted to do something that would preserve the best interests, protect the best interests of Richfield based on any unforeseen circumstances. And certainly a pandemic and the shift to work remote hybrid models, where maybe I'm sure that's one factor that has contributed to the decline in the value of the property. And so I like this agreement because I think it does preserve the best interests of protecting the rights and the interests of the city in light of mitigating circumstances. Any additional thoughts or comments? I guess I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve a resolution approving the attached contract and assessment with Best Buy Co. Inc.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, that brings us to our HRA discussion items. Any topics on anyone's mind? I guess the only thing I would say, and this is just kind of a point of community interest, is tomorrow is the big reveal on which community globally wins the rights to host the 2027 World's Fair. And so I think they say that the announcement will be made about 7 a.m. our time. So for everybody who's been following that issue, it'll be interesting to tune in the news and find out the decision. So that'll be interesting.
I agree that that's very exciting. So it's going to have a big impact on Richfield because we're right next door.
Yep, definitely could have some impact on our community. All right, anything else? All right, we will move on to the Executive Director's report.
Thank you. I just had one quick announcement because I was going to also mention the 2027 Expo and the possibility of partnering for that site we have at Highway 77 and 494 and how exciting that might be for that. Also, I wanted to mention that we did get preliminary estimates regarding the Metro sales tax that was approved by the legislature for housing purposes, and we would anticipate that next year, even though it will be a partial collection year, we will be getting $53,000 to work for affordable housing. And that, again, is, for those who didn't remember, is calculated based on population and the percentage of your population that is considered cost burdened. So more money coming our way to do good work.
Commissioner Supple.
Could I ask a follow-up question? Does that go to the city or does that go to the HRA?
I believe it comes to the city, and then we'll need to work out the mechanism. The HRA would obviously be the body who would typically program for that funding. So we'll have to work that out with Finance Director Verma.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. We will move on to claims.
I'll move approval of the claims.
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, and that concludes our business tonight for the HRA meeting. We stand adjourned. All right, I'd like to call the Economic Development Authority meeting to order, the meeting of June 20th, 2023. This is now an open forum. Each speaker who would like to address the Economic Development Agency is asked to keep their comment period to 3 minutes to allow for sufficient time for others. Comments are to be an opportunity to address the EDA. Please refer to the EDA agenda and minutes webpage for additional ways to submit comments. You may also call 612-861-9764 or email ldubois@richfieldmn.gov with questions. People in our greater audience may call the open forum tonight by dialing 1-415-655-0001. That's 1-415-655-0001. Use webinar access code 2630-557-9041 and password 1234. Do we have anyone calling in?
Acting Chair, we do not.
Okay. Is there anyone here in tonight's audience who would like to address the Economic Development Authority? Okay, seeing no one. I'd like to seek approval of the minutes of the Economic Development Authority work session of April 17th, 2023, and the regular Economic Development Authority meeting of April 17th, 2023.
A move approval of those minutes.
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And that will bring us on to staff report number 6. Oh, excuse me, I forgot the agenda. So I'd like to seek a motion for approval of tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now we will move on to staff report number 6.
And the consent calendar.
And this is the consent calendar, yes, for number 6 and 7.
Yes, thank you. The consent calendar contains several separate items which are acted upon by the EDA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved. No further EDA action on these items is necessary. Item A is consideration of the approval of revisions to the Transformation Loan Program guidelines. And item B is to amend the Kids at Home Rental Assistance Program guidelines, expanding the service area to include the unincorporated territory of Fort Snelling. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a comment in the discussion.
Oh, right, sir.
I just wanted to thank staff for bringing back this transformation home loan, because I believe this was the item that was previously before us. So thank you for adding duplexes. I think it reflects the spirit well, in addition to the original addition of the ADUs.
Commissioner Supple?
I would echo those thanks, and I also thought it was great that we've expanded the area for the Kids at Home program, so we can help the kids that are over in the Fort Snelling area as well.
All right, well, now I will entertain a motion.
We do have the motion in second, so I think you just need to call for a vote. Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, EDA discussion items. Anything people would like to bring before the authority tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to the Executive Director's report.
I do not have a report tonight. Thank you.
All right, claims.
I'll move approval of the claims.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and that concludes tonight's business. We will call the meeting adjourned.